Good morning, everyone. This is Waterfowler41 here, and in today's video, instead of doing an actual step-by-step installation of a truck part, I'm gonna walk you through how I installed bed lights in my bed. So if you follow me on Instagram, which I hope you do, you see in the last couple of days I've been sharing pictures about my budget bed lighting project. So basically what I did here is I scrounged up all these extra parts that I had laying around from other projects, be it a switch, LEDs, wire taps and everything, and pulled it all together so I can install bed lights on my 2020 Ram Rebel. For whatever reason, bed lights on these trucks is not standard. It's an option. It's kind of dumb. And if you want to install the factory ones, the factory harness and lights and kit and everything, it's relatively cheap. So I think it's about 120 bucks for the harness itself. But you also need to have your BCM reprogrammed in order to activate that feature inside the truck. So certainly you could do that with an Alpha OBD, but for the layman, you're going to be installing a harness, then you got to go to the dealership. So you're probably looking at upwards of over 250 bucks just to get the bed lights. This project probably cost me, in the end of the day, 25 bucks. So let's walk through how I installed them, what lights I used, and how they work here. So first, I got my tonneau cover pulled back one panel. Grab the switch here and see. So there's tons of light. So let's take a look at how I actually installed it. So I purchased this little light kit from a company called Nightlight on Amazon. So basically it was maybe 10, 12 bucks. But basically you get 2 strings of these little LED pods. So let's turn that light off so you can see. So these pods are roughly about 3/4 of an inch wide. And because I have the X-Tang Encore rail, I had this 1-inch surface here that I was able to double stick the LED lights too. Now most guys will go up underneath here, underneath the bed rail, and install like an LED strip. With my Rhino liner and how dirty it was, I wasn't able to get these things to stick very well to the liner. So I said, screw it, I'll just go to here. And this worked out much better for my application, and I'll show you why in a second here. But like I said, when you buy this kit, you get 4 LEDs per string, so you get 8 total. So I have 4 on the driver's side here, and then 4 on the passenger side there. So I have one really far up in the front, split the difference in the middle, and then I got one towards the rear. And at night, let's close this. There's tons of lighting, and you can certainly see what you're doing in there. Now, if you had the factory lighting would go right in here in these little pockets. I thought about buying one of those KC Cyclone lights and putting it right here and having those shining there. But when they rhino lined my truck, they rhino lined right over it, and I didn't want to mess around with cutting this stuff out. So I decided let's just do a surface mount to that rail and rock and roll with that. So as far as the wiring, it's very simple. Basically, the end of the wire is over there. So you got 4 lights, and then on each side of my bed, I drop the wire down to pull power from down below by the trailer harness. So again, over here, start it up at the front, and then to run that wire, and if you look really close up in there, you could see I just took that wire and just channeled it right down, and then it drops down on both sides behind the headlight. I found a couple brackets here where I could zip tie it to, and then you're good to go, and the wire's not going to go anywhere. Definitely wrap that wire in loom. That way, if it does bounce around in there, it's not going to chafe or anything like that. So after I installed the LEDs, I dropped the wire down there. The other thing I did is I picked a switch. So this is a little surface mount switch, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. But you could do a flush mount. You could use one of these holes if you wanted to. For what I was doing, I wanted to make sure that it was waterproof, but also I didn't want to start cutting away at any of the Rhino liner here. So this works actually perfect. So it's super accessible too from outside the truck. So when you're walking in, you can basically reach down here and turn the light on and off. So we got the lights. They were double stick taped to the bottom of my Encore's rail, and if you have a roll-up tonneau cover, this will work too. The other thing I could have done is I could have put them on the inside, but with them shining straight down, it's plenty of light you could see. So not an issue on that one. So drop the wires down, install the LEDs on the rail, then I grabbed all the wires down here. So let's go ahead and get up underneath the truck, and I'll show you how I tapped into the power for a 12-volt constant. I guess before we get down underneath the truck. So with these lights, so there's a wire connecting each of the lights, and then at the end there's just a wire going into the light, not coming out of it. So with most of these roll-up tonneau covers, you have a little channel here that your brackets use to bite the side of the bed rail. So I ran my wires in there, and then I took this stuff called foam backer rod, and just basically use the foam backer rod to push everything and hold it up, basically sandwich it up in here into that channel. So I have the light, and then my wire runs along here, and then that foam backer rod, so you can see some of it over there kind of popping out a little bit because that was probably where the clip is at. But anyway, foam backer rod pushed it up in here, and it held the wires up out of the way, and I just zip tied it where I can. So I got no wires hanging down, so nothing's going to get caught in any of the cargo in there. All right, let's go ahead and get the tailgate closed and go up underneath the truck, and I'll show you how I tied in the wires. All right, before we go underneath the truck, I just wanted to show you the 7-pin trailer harness here. So on this trailer harness, this terminal, so the top right one, is constant power. So you're always getting power to this. So when you go on the back of the truck and you pull this harness off, that's where I took the power from for my bed lights. So let's go up underneath there and take a look at that specifically. Okay, so we are underneath the truck. This is the back of the trailer harness. I pulled off the split loom that I had on here just to show you kind of how I wired it. Then I'll go ahead and throw it back on there. But basically, you pull this little, that is the back of the trailer harness. So you pull that down, and then you got to pull off some of the factory tape so you can get access to the wires. Then there's a red wire that goes right to that terminal. So you tap into that red wire, and that's where you're going to get your 12-volt power source. So when I tap into wires like this, I hate using those pinch taps. I use these things called posi taps, and I'll show you how they work in a second here. But posi taps give you a nice waterproof tight connection. So I pulled my 12-volt power from there, and then I run it into a fuse. So I have, I think, a 5-amp fuse in there. I don't need much. And then from there, that's where I tie in with my switches and the lights. So this is the power. This power goes right up to the switch. Then it comes back down, and then that positive from the switch ties into both of the lights. So when you hit the switch, it connects the circuit and turns everything on. Then as far as a ground, there is a ground on both sides of the chassis. So I just back that 10mm bolt off a little bit, and then that's where I put my ground for my bed lights. So I borrowed a ground that was already existing. You could certainly find one anywhere else, but I wanted to keep everything right in this general area, and this is right behind the spare tire. So again, fuse everything. Every time you're running power in your truck, make sure you add a fuse on there. It's just safety. Don't ever hardwire anything straight without a fuse. It's super dangerous, especially in the back of the truck. This stuff's going to get beat up, salt's going to take its toll on it, and you want to be able to protect everything that you're installing. So again, I pulled a 12-volt power from my trailer harness here, dropped it into a fuse. That fuse then goes up, runs directly to that switch. That switch is rated for 12 volts, so it'll be able to handle that. Then once you press that switch, it connects the circuit. The power comes back down here, and then it tees off to both of the positives on each side of the LEDs. And then I ran my ground here, connected them to an existing ground, and that's it. So let's get up out of here, and I'll show you how these posi taps work, because they're a pretty slick little system. Okay, so I will show you how I tapped in the wires. So the best way to possibly do this is obviously clip the wires and then solder your connections in, but there are other opportunities or other alternatives to doing that. You can obviously go the old school route, which is this guy. Is basically like a piggyback splice for a wire. So what you would do is you would take the wire that you want to run out of the clip, run that through here, and then you basically grab the wire that you're trying to grab the source from. So that's how you do it. And then you take pliers, pinch this down, and it basically splice into each of the wires. To me, this is kind of old school. It's a little janky. It certainly works, but it doesn't really provide you much weatherproofing on the splice itself. So I don't use these anymore. I just kind of got these laying around from old projects. So what I like to use is this thing. So it's called a posi tap. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're certainly worth it as far as the installation. So when you are pulling power, you basically take this little cap end of it. So let's say this is our power wire that we're trying to pull a signal from. You take the bottom of the cap, you run it like that. So it'll pinch the wire that you're trying to pull the source from. Then you take the posi tap body, and it has a pin on the end of it. So when you twist that in, that pin will penetrate the insulation and go right into that wire and give you a nice tight installation. So then as far as pulling the signal off there, now you have basically a T or a 90 coming off of there. You take a wire that you stripped appropriately, you run it like that, and then you take the wire, basically run it in here, and that's how you get your connection. Just cinch this all the way down. I like these because they're very specific to the wire gauge that you're using, and if you match it properly, it gives you a nice watertight finish, so it's not going anywhere. So PosiTap, I'll leave a link to these guys in the description below. This is, I think, typical either 12 or 14 gauge trailer wire that I use for most of my lighting, but it works really well for these applications, and it's also really easy to use these in tight locations. So if you have a really tight wire harness, like on the back of that trailer harness down below, it is really easy to slide this little backing piece up underneath the wire harness and then drop this guy down on it. So it's really good for tight applications. But anyway, that's how I grab the power for my bed lights, and then that power runs all the way up here up to my switch. My switch basically connects the circuit. You hit the button on the switch, and that's how we get light. So I'll leave a link to all the parts that I use down in the description below, but that is how I did my budget bed light project on this truck. Again, kind of pissed off that these trucks just don't come like this from the factory, but it is what it is, and these will work. So I think I spent maybe $25 on this one. Anyway, appreciate you dropping in and taking a look at the budget bed lighting project. Let me know if you have any questions on the installation. Certainly something that it's not Ram specific. This could basically work on any truck. As long as you have a trailer wiring down there, you can grab the power for it. If not, you can always just run a wire up to the front and grab power from your battery. Again, always use an appropriately sized fuse on those. Don't ever try to run a solid wire from the battery all the way in the back without a fuse somewhere in there. It's preferably closer to the battery. So with that said, these are my budget bed lights, and they are knocking it out of the park. And certainly check out my Instagram if you can. I share a lot of pictures of these projects and a lot more details on the parts and everything there. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on this. But what do you think? Budget bed lights. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it.